Hi, everybody. It is Heidi M again, and I'm joined virtually by Guillaume Saindon. Did I get your name?
Yes, it's not an easy one, so good one.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So Guillaume, I know you are someone who's worked in theater and other parts of the arts world. We're going to be talking about a work that you're sort of part of at SummerWorks Performance Festival here in Toronto very soon. But let's tell folks a little bit about you. Did you train in theater? What is your background in the arts?
Yeah, so I started by in terms of training, I started working as an actor when I was younger,
Mhm.
mostly on TV sets in Francophone Ontario. Um, and then I studied theater as an undergrad and moved on to do a master's in digital narratives.
Mm,
And that's where I studied more the combination of digitality, technology, and so on in live art, theater, stage, dance, performance contexts.
Can you maybe, 'cause I'm really curious now that you mentioned it. What is digital narratives? What would be an example of a digital narrative?
It's a very wide concept, and
Mhm.
in that specific master's program, we were all the students were from very different backgrounds.
Right.
So I was coming from theater, but there was a journalist, there was a cinematographer, there was scientists, and so on. And so basically, it's really like digital narratives is any form of narration, fictional or non-fictional, that is making use of or dealing with the subject of digitality.
Mhm.
Um, and that can be digitality as a format, or as I said, a subject. So a
Right.
format, it can be, or rather, format or even a tool.
Mhm.
So as an example, the piece that we're presenting at SummerWorks, what is left of us, is making use of technology to tell the story,
Right.
but it doesn't necessarily deal with the subject of. So
Mhm.
in some ways, it could be, it can be seen as a digital narrative.
Oh, I see. Okay. And what was it about that program that kind of drew your attention to it?
The fact that it was so open to multiple different backgrounds. So it
Mhm.
wasn't in a theater school. In fact, it was in a film school, um, but didn't really have much to do with film. The fact that it's an international program, so it's in Cologne in Germany.
Oh, nice.
Um, and so it was a very diverse set of students. And because I was very curious about, I had already started integrating some form of technologies in the works that I was producing and directing. And so I just wanted to take some time to do some more research. And that specific program is a research creation program. So it's
Okay.
part research, 50-50, basically.
Mhm.
And so that was also a very intriguing aspect that attracted me.
Yeah, no, it sounds really cool. I'm gonna have to look into it now.
Yeah.
So you mentioned What Is Left of Us. We offline, we both called it a show, but it has an interactive component, and you mentioned the use of technology. I know that there's information on the SummerWorks website about it, and there might be more information in the next couple of days. But in a nutshell, it has to do with using our telephone booth of the olden days, as they say. And what was it about the concept? I know you're a director of this piece, and what was it about the concept of the phone booth and that was sort of interesting for this project?
Yeah, so the phone booth, it attracted me as an idea because for multiple reasons. The first one being that um, they're they're still very much present, at least in Canada and North America, all over the place. And when you talk to people about them, they're like, "Ah, yeah, it's too bad they've removed those." In fact, they're still there, just near where I live. I live in Ottawa,
Mhm.
and at within 2 minutes walk, there's at least four.
Right.
Um, and of course, I'm downtown, so that's a bit different. But it just goes to show how much they've become invisible in our vision, right? They're all over the place, but we can't see them anymore. And that kind of got me thinking about the whole idea of, what are the things that are part of our daily lives that we just don't see anymore, even though we in fact see them very often. So that
Right.
was the first kind of thematic point of entry. And the second one was I heard this story. I don't remember where actually. It's a while ago. I first heard it in 2015, I think,
Mm-hmm.
um, about a phone booth that was set up in the Mojave Desert
Mm-hmm.
um, in the 50s in the US. And it was set up something like 18 miles from any form of civilization. And so really very much in the middle of nowhere because there was supposed to be a mining project that was going to be developed there in the 50s and it
Oh.
never ended up happening. And so
Mm-hmm.
the phone booth stayed there and remained functional for decades, even though there was nothing around.
Yes.
Until in the 90s, there's this uh, um, hiker that's just going in the desert for some reason that stumbles upon it and of course sees it as some form of an oddity and so decides to call it every day for the next 2 years until someone answers.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then, yeah, someone does answer, and there's a whole story that relates to that. But what I find most interesting is that he then um, wrote an article that was published on a blog, and then early 2000s or late 90s blog, and then was picked up by the New York Times.
Mhm.
And it got really popular, and some people decided to go and visit the phone booth. So
Right.
much so that the foot traffic became detrimental to the ecosystem nearby,
Right.
which is very
Mhm.
fragile. And so the phone booth company was forced to remove the phone booth because people wanted to go and call their mom from the desert and stuff like that. There was even a guy camping there waiting for people to call so that
Oh,
he could
wow.
answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, what I find really interesting with that phone booth in particular is that it really puts into perspective the fact that the other thing that I was already considering, which is, it had to be in the middle of nowhere to finally be seen, right? It had to be in a completely empty desert to finally, become obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And if that hiker had not seen it, it could have stayed there forever. And then that became very much like the basic foundation for the narrative of
Mm-hmm.
the experience, which is, reflecting on what are the traces that we leave as a society, both in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of what they represent, right? The
Mm-hmm.
stories that we told in the phone, the shelter that we found in the phone booth, and so on and so on. And so, yeah, that's where the
Mm-hmm.
the phone booth really comes from, and why I've wanted to do this project.
It sounds so interesting to me because I'm always drawn to interactive pieces because I think they take me out of my comfort zone. So I mean, not to say that I'm not sociable or anything. It's just, there are certain things that sometimes I'm like, I'm not sure. And in hearing you speak about this phone booth, is the idea of what is left of us that we are going to be in the phone booth interacting with the phone, and then from there something is going to happen and kind of take us on a journey.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So basically, what happens is that we we give life to the phone booth, and it becomes the main character,
Mm-hmm.
and it speaks to you and questions you in various ways. So it doesn't speak to you like it doesn't speak with a voice,
Mm-hmm.
but it questions you, and according to the answers that you give back or the feedback that you give, you then hear parts of the narrative, and so different answers will give different bits of the narrative, the story,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and And yeah, as it questions you, it kind of leads you to to ponder those questions of what it is that we leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, is this the first time we're going to be experiencing that anywhere? The what is left of
Um,
this piece, or has it been anywhere else?
so we've presented a prototype version in 2022, summer of 22 in Montreal at La Place des Arts.
Yes.
And we also presented an earlier version again in 2021 in Ottawa, but it's the first time that it's this complete. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't want to say final because there's always stuff that we're adding to it.
Kind of your finesse
Um,
it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, either in terms of adding to the narrative or fixing and adding some aesthetic aspects to it, but also because the fact that people can leave things behind or traces behind. People write on the phone booth.
Okay.
They leave objects. So it's always changing, evolving.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'm very curious about it. And so what has been some of the things that have changed about the performance, the installation from the beginning and now what we're gonna get in a few days?
Yeah, that's a great question. So initially, this wasn't supposed to be an outdoor public installation for one person
Mhm.
at a time in the phone booth.
Right.
Initially, what we had planned, it was much closer to a more conventional theater play in a way. So
Mhm.
there were actors as well as the phone booth, and the phone booth was meant to be experienced inside of a black box theater, basically. And so
Okay.
the spectator was still in the booth, but
Mhm.
instead of interacting with the phone and listening through the handset, it was mostly this idea that you would see from the phone booth
Yes.
outside
Mhm.
scenes of a near future, not necessarily post-apocalyptic, it's not in that sense, but more like, what questioning the notions of legacy and so on.
Mhm.
And with time, we've at some point we decided, oh, we could try it to do it outside,
Mhm.
um, because it lends itself very well to that. And then as we moved forward, it became clear that, it's much more of an intimate relationship with the phone booth. And being
Mhm.
in the phone booth is a very reassuring sensation. Whereas when we were doing it in the black box, people wanted to leave the phone booth. They wanted to go near the actors.
Oh,
So
I
it was,
see.
of course, like an immersive space, but they wanted to go near them and see what they were doing.
Mhm.
And it wasn't necessarily the objective or the intent. And so bringing it closer to them in the phone booth, having this one-on-one relationship is much more intimate and efficient in creating this relationship with the phone booth.
It sounds very cool. And I think you're right. I think there's a difference in whether you have actors around you versus you're kind of the sole participant of the experience.
Yeah.
What has been some of the feedback you had so far in terms of um, I know it's
Then,
only been like the other time, but I'm kind of always curious about what people think.
yeah, I mean, quite frankly, the feedback has been very good. Um, for for what we've managed to do as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't seem like much, just a piece in a phone booth, but it's both technically very, very complex
Sure.
because, for example, we have like it's an actual phone, right? It's a pay phone that the same ones that you can find anywhere in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we had to reverse engineer it to be able to control it, to be
Right.
able to use it. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's this whole like kind of technical complexity, which is just we're outside of any like predefined parameters of theater or um, interactive arts such as VR or something like that, because we suddenly
Yes.
have to create everything from scratch, or if it's already there, then reverse engineer it. So that
Mm-hmm.
was that was quite hard. And so and the reason I'm mentioning that is because even though I worked with digital technologies, I never wanted to be the most apparent thing.
Right.
I'm not in the world of creating gimmicks because they're cool and that's it, right? It has to support the narrative or it
Sure.
has to support the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the main feedback was for most people is, it doesn't show at all. It's basically seamless. It's like we were in an actual phone booth and things are
Mm-hmm.
just happening around us, and it happens to vibrate at some point because it's vibrating and not because I know that you put some things underneath that make it vibrate.
Right.
So the technical aspect being subdued, is is a feedback that we've received quite a bit. And then people have, like, the main thing is that, um, even though that's not exactly what we were aiming to do, people have
Mm-hmm.
been very moved, by the experience. Um, Surprisingly so, as I say, we didn't write this. I say we because we've been multiple collaborators taking
Sure.
part in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we didn't write it thinking, this is going to make them, you know, cry a little bit at that point and so on. It's just our objective was really like to get people to think about what they leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I remember the first time that we presented it, um, my father came to see it, and my parents have seen everything that I've done, and they're very supportive in general. They're not necessarily the type of people that leave emotionally affected by a
Sure.
project. And
Mm-hmm.
my father came out just, tears in his eyes, and I was like, okay, I was not expecting that. And so yeah, we've received quite good feedback. People have been telling us that yes, it has led them to think about, what they will, what their behavior has in terms of impact on future generations,
Right.
um, both, their children or just society in general. Um, I've had someone tell me that the first time they saw the experience of the project, it led them to start thinking about the whole idea of, you know, collapse of society and the role that we take in it, even though we're like
It's small.
minute and we have
Mm.
no real impact, or so we think, and so on. Anyway, they've gone much further, and I've spoken to them since, and I'm like, okay, you've gone really down that path. But
Mm.
yeah, the feedback on that end, and in terms of like emotional reception, has been very very nuanced, and
Yeah.
very developed. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
but no one leaves unaffected. I think it
I
would
like
be.
that. And I think that's what I was saying in the earlier part of the chat where I'm like, it takes me out of my comfort zone, but it's more about also I like this interactive experiences because of the fact that how I react might be different now versus even 3 years ago or 4 years ago or even 10 years ago. And that
Mhm.
might be and also how we see the world and our impact on the world, as you said, right? Or what our circumstances are. And that's sort of like how cool art can be in that you can reverse engineer something and kind of elicit all these emotions in people and who knows where it's going to go, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the reasons that I very much work with creating these installations, or perhaps more interactive or immersive, experiences, is specifically that. It's because, um, like, I can be very touched by a narrative that I'll see from a distance, say in a theater space, and I myself direct some of these. But
Sure.
there are some moments where I think, well, if my objective is to bring people to some form of thought process, sometimes a very rational, dictated means of telling them, like, this is what's going on, and we are, going through this part of the forest, and so on and so on. Sometimes it's not the way to get people to either change their behaviors or just take some time to reflect on them.
Mm.
And the strength of these interactive experiences is that it becomes much more of an irrational reception. It's much more of a sensorial one, right?
Mm.
Things vibrate, things smell, things are tactile. You're touching the thing, right? It's interacting directly with you, and so you don't have a choice but to be immediately there. But also, it's not trying to make you logically, experience the thing. It's like, oh, if A, then N plus B, then C, and something like that. It's more like I'm just feeling it right now, and
Mm.
it feels like it's the thing that I should be doing, and so on. And
Yes.
so yeah, that's it. I believe in these type of experiences, that's the strength, right? It's really that you can lead people to observe things differently than
Yes.
than through more conventional structures, formats, or whatnot.
I know, and I remember I've like I said, I like SummerWorks. I tell people this all the time. I like SummerWorks because it does combine all formats of, performing arts in that sense, where some of it I take part in it willingly.
Yeah.
And other times I'm more of the captive audience sitting down and just engaging with the artists. So I was reading on the SummerWorks website that the What Is Left of Us performance is about 20 minutes or so. Is that sort of like a sweet spot for people because it's like a one person experience, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's 1% at a time. And yeah, generally it varies depending on how people react. But
Mm-hmm.
it's generally like sometimes it'll be a little bit faster.
Sure.
And sometimes people will be in the phone booth, it'll finish, and they'll be very much affected by it, and they'll just want to stay in it a little bit more. But yeah, that's generally, 20 minutes is already a lot, I would say, one-on-one for a phone call.
Yeah, I'll just equate that to I was at the Science Center many years ago and I sat in the booth where you're supposed to just guess the time that you're in the
Yeah.
booth with no sound, and you never know how long 2 minutes can be. So I can imagine how 20 minutes could be just
Yeah.
enough for, for
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And some people leave saying like, "Oh, I would have taken more," and other people
mm,
are like, "Nope, that was just the right amount." But as long as they've experienced something, that's fine.
mhm. Yeah, no, I appreciate you describing that in detail. I always think that people kind of need to know what they're getting into, but also knowing that it's okay if, if you don't react the same way I react is totally okay because it's your individual experience. That's the whole point of this
Yeah.
piece. So what happens with What Is Left of Us? Does it continue its journey elsewhere after SummerWorks? Yeah.
I mean, we hope so.
Mhm.
We have another planned showing in Montreal at the end of August.
Mhm.
And then we're waiting to see. We have a few other options, festivals for which we've applied, and places that have demonstrated some interest. So we're trying to see what happens with that. We're also trying to get it to tour in Europe.
Nice.
That would be really, really cool,
Mhm.
and a bit of a dream come true for me. But otherwise, yeah, I think the first thing that'll happen is we'll see the results of um, what will have been shown in Toronto, and then we might want to change a few more things here and there just to make
Sure.
sure.
Mhm.
Um, but then, yeah, hopefully touring. Uh, we're also we're also hoping to build a second one. It's such a weird thing to say, but I bought more phone booths.
I was gonna ask you if you had bought one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we had initially bought the first one, the main one,
Mhm.
and we've been working with that one for the past few years. But yeah, we've bought a few more, so we're trying to build up another one at least, so that they can both go on tour either together, so that there are more people that can do the experience,
Yes.
or in different parts of the continent or of the world.
Okay, that's so cool. I'm really curious to see that. So where can people find more information either about What Is Left of Us or your work, Guillaume?
So the best place to go is on our website, which is 2359.productions with an S.
Okay.
Um, and also on our Facebook and Instagram. So 2359 Productions, you should be able to find our Instagram and
Yeah,
Facebook page.
I can
Um,
tell you it comes up real quick on the search.
Perfect.
Amazing. I'll be sure that people have that. It's tagged on the content in the description, so people know where to go. I'm really curious about the performance slash installation, Guillaume. So hopefully we'll see you at some point in the next few days. So it's going to be for folks who are going to watch August 9th to the 11th at SummerWorks Performance Festival. Thank you so much. It's really cool and interesting to hear about your work.
Thanks to you. Thanks for having me.